So I'm beginning to feel a little bit like I know some people here, some faces that I've seen before. And it's always interesting for me when I get an email from Gary, because the prompt is always very, it's like a little homeopathic remedy that makes you start looking at things over the course of however many weeks it is before I get here. And the whole idea of listening, now how can I take that and turn it into what I want to talk about, which is always emotional triggers? That's not so hard, right? Because emotional triggers are the things that get in the way of listening. And I just started up my, 15th cohort of yoga teacher training teachers, students at Minneapolis College. And the first thing we do when we get together is define, well, what even is yoga? And that's defined in the Yoga Sutras as Yoga Chitta Vritti Nirodha, which means yoga is the cessation of the fluctuation of the mind. And I have a prop I'm going to show you. We'll see, maybe the YouTube people can see this even from afar. It's a snow globe, you all know this, but inside is a golden Buddha. And that is a symbol of the witness, the divine within. In yoga we call it Purusha, and that means little person. A little golden, radiant seed of the divine, of the infinite, of eternity, sitting at the center of our chest. And what gets in the way of me seeing you through those eyes and from that place in myself, and for you to see me that way, is the vrittis. And in Sanskrit that means it's all the thoughts that go non-stop. It's all the stories, and it can be even more than a temporary story. It can be what we call a samskara. And a samskara is a deep groove within that has created a pattern that's very hard to lift out of. And the only way that we can begin to lift out of that deep pattern and way of seeing the world is to address the samskara and why is it there in the first place. And if we don't do that, we're going to perpetually interpret life and situations and each other, our partners, through that lens. So we are never really listening until we get in touch with that divine within ourselves. We're trained from a really young age in our system in the West to think. That's what we say when we say no child left behind. We really mean let's teach these kids to read and write in kindergarten, when the reading and the writing actually pushes us into the intellect, maybe a little prematurely, instead of staying in the heart space, in the space that is in touch with everything and everyone and nature. And that's when we start becoming more narrow in the way we see the world. And I think even if we have a spiritual practice where we do our best to fall more into that witness within, everything in the world, all you have to do is open your phone and you're going to start getting messages that polarize you and divide you and make you more like an adult with an opinion. And I can't have an opinion unless you somewhere out there have a different opinion that I can push against. So now the oneness, the part of me that can see the Purusha in you, is starting to get clouded. What I see someone with a different political opinion, have a different stance on an issue I'm passionate about, so now you are the other. And that can be, sort of work if I'm doing that with people that live on the other side of town, but a lot more complicated if I do it with my partner or my kids or my neighbors or the ones right close to me. And maybe even more complicated if I do it to myself. So then what hurts within me is not perceived with the loving awareness of the divine within me that would always rush in and say, I love you, I'm here to hold you and heal you. But would say, that's shameful. Why are you reacting like a 5-year-old when you're 55? That seems totally illogical. Why don't you go hide away until you can come back out and show your face? And that's how we treat, first and foremost, ourselves. And if we treat ourselves that way, which is most people at least some of the time, especially when the really intense triggers come up, then we're going to do that to someone else too, even the ones we love the most. And can we really listen when we come from that place? Can we listen if you're telling me something that really hurts that I did, but I am defensive immediately because I'm not feeling you? If I felt you, if I felt the pain that's in your heart that you're trying to describe to me, what would I do? What do we do when a small child is in despair and crying? I mean, unless you're a really pretty sick human being, you probably would rush in and pick that child up. But we don't do that with ourselves if what is happening feels illogical. So what I would convey today is, first and foremost, we cannot listen truly to anyone and really hear what they're trying to say as long as we are in this constant spinning of our own thoughts and emotions and feelings that are essentially stories that we immediately attach to what someone else is doing and how we feel about it. Yesterday I taught at Minneapolis College, and it was a very emotional day. One of my students had a breakdown in class, and we all rushed in and held her, and it was a balancing act for me as a teacher to be compassionate and make space for that, and also make sure we went through what we needed to go through. And by the time I got home and I laid on my bed, I was crying, and it wasn't like a sobbing, crying, despair. It was just releasing that place I had been in to navigate for 4.5 hours, a classroom with empathy and with direction and with skill. And my daughter came home from her new job, and she's like, "What's going on?" And I told her what had happened in the classroom, and it was all very beautiful in the end. And she said, "Let's go down to the river." And so we went down to Crosby Farm, it's near where I live in St. Paul, and we walked through the trees, like a canopy of trees, and we slowly made our way down to the river and sat by the river, and finally I shut up. Up until then it was gap, 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 gap. And then suddenly that silence of the space around us started to imbue me. And what happens to me, and I've seen this in other people too, is suddenly nature becomes alive and beautiful. Is suddenly the trees are not trees with trunks and leaves, they're energy that are moving, and everything is moving a little more slowly, and it starts to make you move more slowly. And those riddhis from my Buddha here, even without trying, they start to settle down. And suddenly there's this beauty that arises. And when you look at nature and another person through those eyes, you see the little golden Buddha. You see the radiant light. You see the child that has grown older, that is still in there. And you feel that within yourself. And suddenly it's not an intellectual process of saying, I'm going to actively listen. Here are the 3 points I'm going to follow. It comes from a much more almost childlike space of reading and feeling energy in the other person. And I would go as far as to say, if in that space, and it's not just in nature we can experience that, if we stay very grounded in the body, or like the beautiful meditation you briefly led us through. Imagine if every meeting was started with a meditation like that, where we got to drop into the body. When I'm fully in my body, in spite of all the fear and anxieties and wounds and some scars, but I'm here with myself. I'm truly feeling my own divine energy. I am my divine energy, but I'm also the wounded, scared child that needs to be held by that divine energy. And then suddenly when I'm fully there, and you describe to me something that's going on in your life, I feel it too. I don't even need to know the details. I can feel the contraction in the gut. I can feel the lump in your throat. And the divine in me, which is the same divine that is within you, is now helping you process whatever that is. And that's what we call empathy, right? It's not that I'm sitting guarded and saying, yes, it must be hard to be you over there. It's like, I'm with you. I feel this too. When you tear up, I can feel myself tear up. It's like my energy system is now in resonance with you, and I'm doing that deliberately. I'm not crossing boundaries all the time that I'm feeling every human being, because I think that would be way too much, and that's what empaths can tend to do. But in a chosen moment, I am now with you. I am going to help you process your pain. whether as a coach or a friend or a mother or a partner. But how do we get there? And what is that deep pain we feel when somebody seems unimpacted by our pain? And what is the difference between the pain body going berserk versus literally coming in and feeling the grief? Because if somebody is in, and that could be me, and that could be you, has now felt the pain that resides inside an old pain, but now I'm making a story about how this is always how it is, and everybody's like that, and other people are out to get me. In that sort of way of being with the pain, I'm not really with the felt sensation in the body as much as I'm now being hijacked by this story. Can you distinguish that feeling, that difference inside, when you feel the felt sensation of a pain place and you're simply holding that, versus I'm going to take you and me and everybody who wants to listen on a story of my victimhood, and there's actually no happy ending to that story, and if you're happy at the end of it, then you're not my friend. That's very different. I did an experiment not so long ago with my partner. We have a specific recurring argument, and he's an engineer by training, so you can already kind of guess what that might be. He goes into engineering, IT engineering, no less, mode if we start to have a discussion. I go into full-blown artist, intuitive, empathic drama mode, and the two butt heads, like there's no meeting there. The one thing that can get us past that is breath work and meditation that includes prayer of invoking the divine. And I don't know that any healing can really happen without invoking the divine. And we can have our own definition of that. I define it as the divine within myself that is connected to the divine of all creation. But in my intellect, I get distanced from that. So when we breathe together, meditate together, and pray together, we get into a really good space, a space where we can't imagine ever getting into an argument again. But we know we will, because his Spock, I call him Spock, and he calls me the little angry girl with the fist in the air, will come back on the stage because they're not fully healed. And they protect us. So as long as there's protection needed, our little guard will come forth. But we were talking on Zoom, which is how we communicate right now because he's in Europe and I'm here, and we thought, well, what do we do? We feel so good right now. How do we make sure that next time we go into that triggered space that we don't react the way we normally would? And we decided to record a video from my highest, most connected, most right here, non-triggered self to my most triggered self, and to poor him having to deal with my triggered self, and also to him and his triggered self. That was my turn. And then he did the same. So now we had this video ready. And lo and behold, it didn't take a week, and we got into a heated debate that immediately turned into Spock and the little girl with the fist. But we were wise enough to say, okay, let's each go watch the video, which I did. I was in Washington, D.C. visiting a friend, and I was completely contracted because I had been triggered on something very old that had to do with my mom who recently died. But then we tend to find stand-ins for the people that have been our perpetrators in life. So we tend to find people that remind us of what our mom did or our dad did. Well, that's what was happening. So I'm in D.C., I'm in a guest room at a friend's house, it's late at night, and then I was like, okay, now I have to watch this video. So I'm watching myself from this incredibly empathic perspective, saying words like, I love you and I'm here. I know where you're at right now. I know the shame you're feeling because you wrote a book about triggers and now you're triggered. And I know how lonely you feel, how contracted that feels, and just know that you're loved. Words like that. And I was able to simply feel the triggered space within myself as I listened to those words that were, you could say, my highest self words to my most wounded, contracted, pain self. And I cried in a way that wasn't hysterical victim cry. That was true release of grief. And this is going to sound a little nuts, but this is the truth. I'm not sure I've ever felt so loved in my life, which is nuts. I'm 54 years old, and I have had plenty of love in my life, family that loves me, kids that loves me, but that was the most pure sense of being loved. And the tears they were releasing grief, but they were also gratitude that love is in me. And that was my own voice speaking that to me. And something has shifted since. This was in August. Something has shifted since, and it's a continuous unraveling of what stands in the way of vulnerability and deep listening to oneself and to others. There's this deeper capacity for compassion and empathy with people that I would say I had that prior to August, but this is different. This is, it's less about wanting to jump in and fix and help. It's more about, I'm willing to feel this with you in this moment. I'm willing to truly listen so that I can say, here's what I heard you say, not here's my advice for what you should do. And here's where I really am feeling you. And here's what I'm getting about what's going on here. And those are little prompts from some authentic relating exercises that I took part in this building, now that I think about it, in the basement. But even those words of really saying, here's what I heard you say, here's where I felt you the most, took on a completely different meaning. I think right now, in my experience, the sense of being in the world, being here in the United States, and it wasn't really different in Europe. I just came back from living there for 2 years. We're so much online that is a good chunk of our perception of being in the world comes through what we watch online, unless you're smart enough not to do it. But I do it, and many people do it. And so much of what we see there is polarizing. And it's either listening to something you already agree with, which then is prompts you to say, I don't agree with that. Or you listen to something you don't agree with, and then that will do the same. You're going to be polarized again. And that is not going to help the world heal. So I've stopped. Like the things I used to listen to, I was like, yeah, I also think this is horrible, and this is so good, and these are the great people, and these are the bad people. I've just kind of quit. Like I get a bad vibe in my body when I listen to any of it. It doesn't feel like it's here to heal us. It doesn't feel like it's here to create real connection. It doesn't feel like it's here to help us all really feel the deep pain that we're all in from, if not just the last 4 years, probably all of our life story has been fraught with pain that hasn't been listened to and released on a deeper level. Now, am I now this healed person because I had this revelation in Washington, D.C.? I would say one of the ice cubes of contraction in my body has been melted a little bit. It needs to melt more. And that's the thing about real love, which is real listening, which is real empathy. Unless it's unconditional, I don't think it's love at all. So unless I can say to myself, I love you no matter how long it takes to melt those ice cubes, then I can't say it to you. I can't truly show you that I'm here no matter what. It's not a time-limited thing that I'm here to sit with you in your pain, but, it's been 35 minutes now. But really, no, I'm here. I've got you. That doesn't mean that I am now codependently invested in you healing your pain. That's your job to heal your pain with the divine within you, but I'm lending my divine self and presence to you for an amount of time that feels good for me to do and to help you do that for yourself. Yeah? How do you guys react to all that? I have a little exercise in mind, but how does that land with you? Anyone? No? What's your name? Faith. So Faith was just talking about how she's entering back into her body and noticing the triggers that need to be healed. And yes, it's a very slow process. And I think that's such an important point, Faith, because I think we are such a fast fix culture. Like, can I just go and have these triggers fixed and then I'll live my real life? Then I'll be lovable and then I'll be able to love you when you don't have all these triggers getting in the way. What if we were to accept that we come in with so many samskaras, so many rittis, to put it in Sanskrit, and our job is to heal them. Our job is to heal and love ourselves and each other through that, and that goes on from the moment we are scream in the crib the first time and we didn't get picked up till the day we die. And that it's not we get to a point where we don't feel these things anymore. But it's a commitment, right? I feel like everyone I know is looking for that other person who will make a commitment. Are you committed to me? Will you really stick around? Will you really love me? Will you be with me through thick and thin? But that's the commitment we're now making to ourselves if we enter into this work. You know what? And maybe it's not slow. Maybe it's 100 lifetimes. And then finally there's this lifetime where we don't have to toil from morning to night and have absolutely no room to sit and feel ourselves, because we just have to keep persevering and making it through the next day, which has been and still is life for a lot of people. Being able to sit here and even talk about this is pretty luxurious in the greater scheme of how people live in the world. So maybe and I totally understand what you're saying when you say it's slow, but if I were a little kid and I had injured my knee and I showed it to my mom and she had to rinse it yet again and apply some ointment or whatever, and she said, well, that really is healing slow. That would, in some ways, be interpreted as, oh God, I'll be a better person. This could just heal a little faster. If my mom has to rinse this knee one more time, I can feel her impatience with me. And it's not like I don't get that impatience, even if that were even what you were expressing, but I know I felt that toward myself. Like, God, just get me out of all these triggers that live in my body so that my body can feel peaceful at all times. When in reality, as you start to do this work, it's almost the opposite. It's almost like the more you come back home to yourself, the more you realize, wow, there's so much love needed here. How did I ever leave? How did I ever abandon this? And I'm going to do that love work, even if it takes the rest of my life and then some. Yeah? So really, when we say active listening, what are we really saying? Are you willing to be unconditionally present with me for a period of time? Just being right here. If someone is in your house and they sit in the other room and they're reading a book or drawing or writing by hand, there's a certain feeling, right? They're still there. They're not engaging with you, but you feel them. It's kind of nice they're over there doing their thing. If they're on their phone, it's like they're gone. Have you noticed that? It's like you can feel it. That person is on their phone because it's like they just vanished. So that essence and feeling of someone being present here with you now, when that exits, we feel it. It's like the body and the flesh is still here, but I'm not fully here, and therefore I can't be fully there for you. And that has happened increasingly more and more and more. I'm old enough to remember life before the phones and how they became more and more and more part of our life, and how much they started sucking our awareness, our presence. If we think of the most precious thing that another human being can give us, it's presence, right? I'm here. Tell me. I want to know. And we know when someone is really present. We know that feeling when they're really here or when they're kind of scattered and not quite here. And we also know that feeling when I was a kid. I grew up in Denmark, and we would ride public transportation all the time, and you'd step into a train And there was this feeling of like, you were with this other group of people. Maybe somebody would be reading the newspaper, but there's still this feeling of being with others. Now you step into a train in Denmark, and 95% are on their phones, and there's this cold, disconnected feeling that you kind of feel like you could fall and twist your ankle and no one would help you up because they're not really there. So that sense of isolation that I'm feeling, and I'm privileged to get a lot of journals from my students in the yoga teacher training program, and the number one feeling that I am hearing is that sense of isolation and loneliness. And what I'm hearing now, 6-7 weeks into the program, is it's like I've come home to myself. So that feeling that you just described of coming back in. But what is that back in? You touched on it just briefly in the introduction. Feel the body, feel the breath. That we're not caught up in the ritties for a moment. We're coming back to our true self for a moment. So what if that were how we would initiate a conversation, to first do something like that, maybe even longer, where we stay fully present in the body with the breath, and then we have the discussion. I was once invited to a place downtown Minneapolis, I forget what it was called, but it was a place where they would offer sort of group building exercises for executives. And I was asked to teach mindfulness to a group of CEOs from some of the biggest companies in the Twin Cities. And they all came in with a certain air, and even I got intimidated just by their, just alpha upon alpha walking in and having that kind of vibration. And I was like, whoa. And then we all sat down, we had breakfast, and then came my turn to guide the mindfulness practice, which was similar to what you just did, but it was a little longer than that, probably 15 minutes. Just feeling the breath. Breath in my first language, Danish, is the same word as spirit. Feeling your spirit and feeling your body. And when you do that, you tend to not spend so much of your battery power in the intellect. And when they all opened their eyes after that 15 minutes, we were all kids in a sandbox. That persona, roles were just gone. It's like the roles were gone and the souls were there. It was soul to soul. And it was a completely different conversation. It was chatty, and things completely shifted after that. And it was not 2 hours of excruciating seated meditation. It was just 15 minutes of breathing and being present in the body. So Gary, when you ask me what do I think active listening is, I think active listening is full loving presence within oneself and therefore with the other. Where two or more are present, something happens when we're truly there and truly look. And I would also say, teaching in a very diverse environment, that when you do that, all of what could in some settings be, you're different than me, I'm different than you, we're the same over here, we're the same over there, suddenly that all falls away. And it literally is all souls supporting souls, recognizing that we're all struggling and that we're all in pain. Yeah? So let's do a little exercise if you're willing. And I know this is confrontational in some ways, because we'd rather just stay safe and sit and listen and receive information rather than experience. But sit with someone. So if you're sitting alone, there's two guys sitting. You guys know each other. You can sit together. So in twos, you could turn around. You guys already met. Just turn around. And this can also be, you can be three if you don't. Actually, you could move over there. I see a guy sitting over there. So we can all get there's exactly an even number. Okay? So just say hello to your person. Yeah. And then we're going to do a little exercise. But before we do it, we're going to do a little bit more of what Kim took us through in the beginning of this little talk. So close your eyes for a moment. Close your eyes. Be aware of any resistance and annoyance with Maria that she's now making me sit here with another human being, if there is anything like that going on. And then feel your feet, wherever your feet are. Are they on the floor? Did you pull them up? Are you wearing warm shoes? Did you think it was warm, so you're wearing sandals, so your toes are cold? What does it feel like to sit in the seat? Is your back supported? Close the eyes and feel your breath. Just the breath. How many breaths might you be able to take without a ton of thinking? Maybe just a little thinking. What does that sound like? What's going on inside? When you roll the curtains down, what's happening in there? Sense and feel your hands, the palm of your hands, the energy field in the palm of your hands. Can you feel the low kind of electricity, vibration of the chi, the prana, the life force, spirit present in the hands? And can you feel that up through the arms and notice how the hands are connected to the heart space? Can you allow that sensation of presence, spirit essence, to fill the body? From the feet up through the ankles, from the ankles up through the calves and shins, knees and thighs. Sense and feel the low back, buttocks, belly, solar plexus, the heart space, upper back, shoulder blades, throat, back of the neck, sides of the neck, jaw, lips, tongue. The cool air inside the nose as you breathe, eyes, forehead, ears, scalp, hair. Can you sit here for one moment and be fully present in the energy field of your body? The whole energy field. The bones, the flesh, the skin, the organs. Even the fascia moving a little bit with every breath. And now feel that degree of presence in the body, which is probably a little more than you had before we did this. And then open the eyes and see if you can stay that grounded in the body. Sometimes when you open the eyes, the mind starts up again. Stay in the body. And then turn to your person. And this is a very brief little exercise, but you're going to turn to your person, introduce yourself. And now the person with the longest hair is going to start, and you just have 2 minutes to say, here's something that's kind of cool about being me right now, and here's something that's kind of hard. There's just 1 minute per thing. You can choose anything. It can be that your car was cold this morning, or it can be something a little more personal than that, but something that's cool about being you right now, and something that's kind of hard about being you right now. 1 minute, and the person who's listening doesn't do anything except witness. They don't interrupt, they don't say me too, they don't get reminded about what they did yesterday. They just hold space and listen. This is practicing presence with someone else who's telling you for 2 minutes about something that's cool, something that is a little hard. Start now. Just finish your thought or your sentence. What did it feel like to express for just a couple of minutes something about where you're at? Maybe it's hard to stop, that's nice. And what was it like to listen and pay attention for a full 2 minutes? Did you manage not to interrupt? Did you manage to hear it? Okay. And now the listener is going to reflect back, like I said, here's what I heard you say, here's where I felt you the most, here's what I'm getting about you. 2 minutes, see if you can get them all in there. Here's what I heard you say. Here's where I felt you the most. Here's what I'm getting about you. Conclude. Close your eyes for a moment. You just had a 4-minute conversation with another human. And now you'll take turns, switch. So the person who just reflected back will do the same. Here's something that's kind of cool about being me right now. Here's something that's kind of hard. Conclude your thought. Know that the conversation can continue later. And just sit for a moment and feel what it was like to be interrupted. I had more to say. What was it like to listen? And then reflect back to your partner in a similar fashion. Here's what I heard you say. Here's where I felt you the most. And here's what I'm getting about you. Bring it to a close, and then close your eyes just momentarily. Feel the vibration in the body of having been present with another human, both as a listener and as a speaker, for 8 minutes, an 8-minute conversation with another human. And that's about all we have time for today, but if you want to do some more inner work with yourself, I do have a workshop next Sunday at St. Paul Yoga Center if you're one of those people that ever cross the river. So you can check that out. Come ask me about that after class. But I'd love to hear what you experience now, if anybody wants to share just for a moment. What was it like? Anyone? Faith?
Very good at sharing.
My good student, my only student. Yeah.
So me and my friend Cynthia were very close dear friends, so kind of an easy experience, I will say, for us. But we kind of delved more into like the scarier parts of things. So that I cried a little bit, but it was really good. It just felt good to know that there's someone that always has your back. Like you said, like that unconditional love. It's always there with her, and she feels the same with me. So it's just nice to know that.
Yeah. And to dive into that, I saw some tears. Yes?
The experience I had is that I could share with the other person the desire to do a good job and to do well and to put out 100% or more, but it wasn't possible. So it felt frustrating.
What was impossible?
To give 100% or more in a particular situation.
Why not?
Because the coworkers just wouldn't go for that.
Okay.
So it felt frustrating because I had the same feeling. You know, when you do a job, you give 100% or more.
Yeah.
But it didn't seem possible in this situation.
Okay. Well, I would say don't take that on necessarily. Just say, I did my part. I was here to practice listening and practice speaking. And that's really all it is. And I think more than ever now, to kind of hold our idea about what someone else should or shouldn't do works well. Just being within ourselves and say, I'm here to show up. Anyone else? No? Good. Yes?
It's exercise, turning off your own mind, things you've got going on back ahead, while you're processing something, but actually focusing on
Yeah.
that.
Right. Yeah, no, that's really difficult to actually fully listen and not have a story happening simultaneously. It's a little bit like having the TV on while you're trying to talk to someone, you know? That becoming present, meditating, creating more of a sense of being the witness and not all the thoughts that are happening. It's a little bit like figuring out, well, where is that damn remote? Can I turn this volume down? Can I change the channel? Can I turn the damn thing off? That's really the practice. Yeah. Anyone else before we end? Yes.
I would just like to thank you for putting into words so eloquently this whole process of going within and dealing with the inner pains and scars as you describe them, and just kind of using all that negative energy to get it out of the body, creating a more peaceful, joyous presence as a result. And thank you for articulating so well.
Thank you. And thank you for articulating that back to me. I really do appreciate that very much. It's been a long, painful journey to be able to put it into words. But I just got my book accepted by a publisher, so that feels like a... Thank you. It feels like it is a message that's needed out there. I had lunch with my editor on Friday, and she said she's getting a lot of submissions about emotional triggers, and it's a thing. I mean, we're starting, all of us collectively, to put words on that and to name that and to acknowledge that that's happening between us and within us. Yeah? Good. Well, I'm definitely getting we have to end now, so we're going to come up here for a closing circle, if you don't mind.